morning, everyone. Welcome to English today. Now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to order the story of the lighthouse keeper's lunch. So you're going to need to be thinking about what happened in what part of the story. So to be successful today, you'll need to be able to recall, that means remember, key parts of the story. So really important parts that happened along the way. And then you're going to need to order these pictures correctly because we're going to be doing it with ordering of pictures today. So I'm going to read the story to you. And as we're reading, I'm going to stop every so often and just talk about what has happened so far. Okay. So once there was a lighthouse keeper called Mr. Grinling. At night time, he lived in a small white cottage perched high on the cliffs. In the daytime, he rowed out to his lighthouse on the rocks to clean and polish the light. Mr. Grinling was the most industrious lightkeeper. Come rain or shine, he tended to his light. And sometimes at night, Mr. Grinling lay asleep in his warm bed, and the ships would toot to tell him that his light was shining brightly and clearly out to sea. Each morning, while Mr. Grinling polished the light, Mrs. Grinling worked out of the kitchen of the little white cottage on the cliffs, concocting a delicious lunch for him. Once she had prepared the lunch, she packed it into a special basket and clipped it onto a wire that ran from the little white cottage to the lighthouse on the rocks. So what can we recall so far? So at the very beginning of the story, there was the introduction. Once there was a lighthouse keeper called Mr. Grinling. That was the first part of our story. We were introduced to where he works at the lighthouse and where he lives in the little white cottage. Then the story told us that he was the most industrious lighthouse keeper. That means he worked really hard. Come rain or shine, he was always at work. And then it told us that sometimes at night time, the ships would toot to tell him that his light is shining brightly and clearly. And in that last picture, that last part of the story, I'm going to move my picture to the middle here because there's going to be some more in a little bit, was about Mrs. Grinling. So we're introduced to her and she makes him a delicious lunch and she sends his lunch across the wire from the little white cottage right down to the lighthouse. Okay, let's move on. But one Monday morning, something terrible happened. Mrs. Grinling had prepared a particularly appetising lunch, and she had made a mixed fruit salad, a lighthouse sandwich, a cold chicken garni, sausage and crisps, peach surprise, icy biscuits, drinks, and assorted fruit. She put the lunch in the basket, as usual, and sent it down the wire. But the lunch did not arrive. It was spotted by 3 scavenging seagulls who set upon it and devoured it with great gusto. "Clear off, you varmins!" shouted Mr. Grinling, but the seagulls took not the slightest notice. That evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling decided on a plan to baffle the seagulls. "Tomorrow I shall tie the napkin to the basket," said Mrs. Grinling. "Oh, yes, of course, my dear," agreed Mr. Grinling. "A sound plan." On Tuesday evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling racked their brains for another plan. "They're a brazen lot, those seagulls," said Mrs. Grinling. "Brazen indeed," said Mr. Grinling. "What shall we do?" "Our cat does not appear to like seagulls," said Mrs. Grinling. "No, my dear," said Mr. Grinling. "Hamish is quite the accomplished seagull chaser." "Of course," exclaimed Mrs. Grinling. "Tomorrow Hamish can guard the lunch." "A most ingenious plan," agreed Mr. Grinling. Hamish did not think that this plan was ingenious at all, and he spat and he hissed at Mrs. Grinling as she secured him in the basket. There, Hamish," said Mrs. Grinling consolingly. "I'll have a tasty bit of herring waiting for you when you get home." Sadly, Flying did not agree with Hamish. His fur stood on end and the basket started to sway. His whiskers drooped when he peered down at the wet blue sea, and he felt much too sick to even notice the seagulls, let alone scare them away from his lunch. "Pretty kitty, like a piece of lobster mortar, eh? Oh, this food gets better every day, Fred. Aren't you going to chase us, kitty?" Okay, so what's happened now? So we talked about that first part of the story, didn't we? But what's happened now? What have I just read? I wonder if you can remember. Pause the video here. Have a quick chat with the person in the room. Okay, welcome back. Let's see if we got the same. I'm just going to move my picture to there because I know there's going to be some pictures popping up. So first, Mrs. Grinling had prepared a delicious lunch, hadn't she, ready for Mr. Grinling. But then the lunch didn't arrive. Mr. Grinling had to notice, the seagulls stealing his lunch. So then they decided to make a plan to tie the napkin to the basket, but it didn't work, did it? No. What happened next? That's it. They decided to make another plan and put Hamish in the basket. But he didn't really like being in the basket and he felt a little bit sick, so he didn't scare off those seagulls. Yeah, and then he was stuck and the seagulls still ate the lunch. Dear me. Did you get that correct? Could you order those different parts of the story by telling somebody in the room? Fantastic. Let's carry on with our story. Lack a day, said Mr. Grinling sadly. Meow, meow, agreed Hamish pitifully. On Wednesday evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling racked their brains again for a new plan. What shall we do? Mrs. Grinling looked thoughtful. I have it, she exclaimed. Just the mixture for hungry seagulls. Oh, indeed, my dear, said Mr. Grinling. What do you have in mind? Just you wait and see. Just you wait and see, she said. Mustard sandwiches, chuckled Mr. Grinling. A truly superb plan, my dear. On Thursday morning, Mrs. Grinling carefully packed the mustard sandwiches and sent them off down the wire to the expectant seagulls. On Friday morning, Mrs. Grinling repeated the mustard mixture. It's the same as yesterday's lunch, Fred. Well, right, boys, let's go and have lunch elsewhere. So, on Saturday, up in the little white cottage on the cliffs, a jubilant Mrs. Grinling put away the mustard pot before she prepared a scrumptious lunch for Mr. Grinling. While he waited for his lunch down on the lighthouse on the rocks, Mr. Grinling sang snatches of old sea shanties as he surveyed the coastline through his telescope. And this is what he saw. We'll fly back here again tomorrow for lunch, boys. Oh, there's no mustard on this lot, Tom. Oh, it's as delicious as Claire, Fred. Ah, well, mused Mr. Grinling as he sat down to enjoy as he sat down to enjoy a leisurely lunch in the warm sunshine. Such is life. So let's have a little think. We talked about the last part. What happened in this last part of the story? Can you remember? Pause the video here and have a talk to the person in the room. Okay, welcome back. I'm just going to move my picture to the middle. Let's see. So at the very beginning, we had mustard sandwiches, didn't we? So after they decided that the plan with Hamish didn't work, they decided to use mustard sandwiches to stop those pesky seagulls. And it worked. Those seagulls did not like those mustard sandwiches at all, did they? And then that helped Mrs. Grinling to get back to preparing a delicious lunch because she did it for 2 days. Then Mr. Grinling saw the seagulls going after another fisherman's lunch, didn't he? And he sat down and he enjoyed his lunch himself. Okay, so now then, thinking about ordering the story, I have 3 pictures here. Okay, I have the picture of where Mr. Grinling is telling the seagulls to go away. I have the mustard sandwiches and I have the little white cottage and the lighthouse. But which picture comes first? Can you put these pictures in order of how they happen in the story? You have this on your worksheet, so I'd like you to have a go at that one now, and then we're going to check that you've got it right. You can either put a number next to it or you can cut them out and put them in order. Pause the video, have a go at that now. Okay, welcome back. Let's see then how you got on. So I am now, going to just go to the next one. And I've got the picture number 1 was the little white cottage and the lighthouse. Picture number 2 was the seagulls stealing Mr. Grinlin's lunch for the first time. And picture number 3 was Mrs. Grinlin and her mustard sandwiches. Did you get that correct? Brilliant. So now I've got some more pictures I need you to order for me. So here we go. You have Hamish in the basket and the seagulls teasing him. You have Mrs. Grinlin putting the mustard sandwiches in the basket. You have the seagulls stealing the lunch. And you have Mrs. Grinlin preparing a rather delicious lunch. Which picture comes first? Can you now order these pictures in the order that they come in the story? That's your activity for today, Year 1, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how well you get on with that. Tomorrow, you're going to be having a go at ordering some phrases in the story. So good luck with that, and you might need this again tomorrow to help you. You take care now, and I'll see you very soon. Bye now.